Hello everyone. Been a while since my last video. Life gets in the way. I'd like to talk to everyone about a game by Sam Mustafa, Lasalle, 2nd edition. Now, it's a Napoleonic war game where your standard unit is your artillery battery, cavalry regiment and infantry battalion. Now, that's not normally a scale that I'm interested in. I am far more a big battle rule set. I prefer things such as Sam Mustafa's Blucher, Napoleon's battles, even rule sets such as Et Sans Resultat, where each single stand is a battalion, but the emphasis is very much on divisions, corps, whole armies, that sort of thing. But this particular rule set by Sam is, in my view, so different that I feel compelled to share a few thoughts with you. I've played, I think it's about 5 games now, and really enjoying it. Like any set of rules, there are things that I sort of go, really? I'm not convinced about. And perhaps I'll talk to you about those as we go. But on the whole, very unique and very enjoyable. Now, first off, I've got here the PDF. Now, I won't show... focus. I won't show too much. Most of what I'm going to be showing to you, at least in this initial presentation, is the downloads that are freely available from Sam Mustafa's Honor website. So if you Google Sam Mustafa Honor, it should take you to his website with his various games there. And there are quite a few free downloads. Now, what Sam has decided to do, though, given that the cost of postage is now seemingly out of control and to the point that it's prohibitive, Sam has decided that now a lot of his games, future games, he will mostly simply release as a PDF for people to download. And he points out that one advantage of that, in this rulebook, there is no army lists per se. They are freely available, again, on the Sam Mustafa's Honor website. And so what he's saying is there, I can, amend these, change these, free for people to download. Without having to go through the cost of reprinting books, etc., etc. Now, the PDF, as you can see there, 154 pages long. Not sure if that includes the front cover. No. So it is, it's quite a substantial paper and ink cost, I suppose, but I haven't found it prohibitive. Certainly a hell of a lot less than the cost of producing a book. Now, as you've already seen as part of the introduction to the video, now I've downloaded the headquarters card. Now, this is the heart and soul of the system. Now, this is an enlarged copy. You can actually, that's about half an A4 or an Australian A4. Not sure how that equates to the UK or the USA, etc. But again, this is freely downloadable from his website. And this is the heart and soul of the system. Now, you've already seen the quick reference sheet. Now, that is for This is for experienced players. Again, freely available on the download. We will go through this in some detail. I've also printed up, there's an introductory scenario. Again, downloadable. And we'll go through what some of these dot stashes and whatever else mean. And finally, also freely available. And if you're interested in investigating this game in any way, shape, size or form, definitely download this. This is, as it says, rules summary basic information. And by simply downloading this, it will give you a very good idea. This is basically a much expanded QRS. But this will give you a very good idea of what the game is and how it works and whether or not the game is for you or not. Okay. Sorry, things going out of focus there, as they will. I've been wondering lately whether it's worth me considering pulling the pin on all this YouTube. I'm hardly a talent at it. But, yeah, look, I thought I'd get this out at the very least. So what is it that I'm rambling on about that makes this game so different? Well, most games have phases. You know, you might start with a movement phase, a shooting phase, then combat phase, then rally. In this game, no such animal. All of that is, in effect, mixed together. There's no countercharge, no opportunity fire, no emergency square, no zones of control. It really is quite different. Okay, what we might do is have a little break. I'll put my thinking cap on and work out how the best way to move through this is, and perhaps maybe get just a few of my 15mm figures out to give you some examples. Okay, back in a minute. Okay, you'll have to forgive the bare nature of the presentation, but I've set up a few 15mm British troops, and on this side a few 15mm French troops, just on the bare table, no scenery obviously, etc, etc, but more than adequate for trying to explain some of the rules mechanisms. Rather than go through sort of a blow-by-blow description, I thought best, given time constraints, and we don't want the video going for 2 hours, if I cut through to what it is that makes this game system so different that I want to talk about it. As mentioned previously, this is the heart and soul of the game system, the headquarters. Now, over there on your left-hand side, you'll see some boxes marked up to 12 for momentum. Now, one of the first things you do of a turn is calculate the momentum. You usually get one, well, not usually, you do get one per brigade on table. Forces often consist of, say, 3 or 4 brigades. Can be bigger for larger games. Normally, you're looking anywhere from about 12 to 20 units per player. So 1 point per brigade on the table, 2 for the baggage. Now, there is an advanced game, which we won't go into today, 1 per ADC. Each side only has 1 general. Now, with the general, you've got an option. You can use the general in what's called an intervention phase. He gets plonked down on the table, and any unit within 4 base widths, for measurement in the game, Sam uses base widths so there's no pre-required basing system. So anything within 4 base widths of your general in the basic game can do an emergency formation change. There are other things that they can do in the advanced game, which I won't go into here, but that's your option with the general. Or you can choose not to use him in what's called the intervention phase. Basically put him here on your headquarters chart. You roll a die, and depending on what you roll, you can get an extra 1, 2, or 3 momentum points. Now, let's, for argument's sake, say the British had, in what I've got here, British and French, let's say the British had 7 momentum points and the French had 6 momentum points. Say both sides decided not to use their general, and the British rolled a bit better for getting momentum points with their general. That doesn't mean that you've won the momentum phase. That depends on skirmishing. Now, for skirmishing, it's fairly abstracted in the basic game. Once again, there is an advanced game option, which we won't go into. But basically, each unit, infantry unit on the table that's in an appropriate formation. So if the infantry unit is in line of march along a road, they are not included. But for every appropriate infantry unit or unit that's in an appropriate formation, you get dice for the skirmish phase. Now here's the French card. Now you can see they're all 3s next to that little chap there. That just indicates it's infantry. So they're all 3. So you would total all of those up. And just to give you an idea, now here's the Austrian card for the introductory scenario. You can see some have got 2, some like the Grens have got 3. So again, different troops, different effects. Obviously, British rifles would get a better British rifles would get a better value. So it really is a bit of a bucket of dice thing. You roll dice. One game, I think I had 24 dice as the French. My Austrian opponent oscillated between 12 and 18. And you're looking for 6s. Now, the person who throws the most 6s wins the chance to go first. Now, it doesn't matter, say, for example, if the French had 5 and, say, the British rolled really well and they had 8. If the French win the skirmish phase, they still get to use their 5 momentum first, or start using their momentum first before the British. With the skirmish phase, the other thing I should mention is that whoever wins the skirmish phase throws more 6s. For each difference of 2, for each 2 advantage in skirmish, they get an extra momentum. Okay. Okay, so let's have a look here at this particular little mini scenario I've set up. Focus, you can do it. There we go. So all of this momentum, what do you do with it? Well, you use momentum to issue orders. Now, an order can either be a force or a global. By global, that means everyone can do it. When it's a force order, which you can see there, rally or movement, it has to be a certain group of units who belong to the same brigade, and they are all within 4 base widths. Okay? You can read that there at your own leisure. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. Obviously, as you pay a movement point, you lose the momentum points as you pay momentum points. You lose that point off your total, off your card there. And you have to decide what you're going to try and do. Now, you see the column over here that says interrupt. That's vital. If you do change formation, movement, or rally, when you're near the enemy can interrupt. I'll explain what that means in just a minute. If you're bombarding, now bombarding is beyond 4 base widths. Now, I'll explain what's so important about the 4 base widths again in a minute. You can never interrupt. If it's a volley, you have to volley within or on 4 base widths away, so the enemy can always interrupt. What does interrupt mean? It means that at the end of that particular order, the initiative then goes to the enemy. They get to issue an order. And so you can get this flip-flop effect, backwards and forwards between the sides. Now, complications. This is interesting. Given any certain situation, a complication means that you pay 2 momentum points rather than just 1. And very interesting, difficult terrain. Now, most rule sets will say if you're moving in attack column, you can go, say, 10 inches in the open, 5 inches in difficult terrain. In this game, no. Everything moves at exactly the same rate. Doesn't matter what the terrain is, but you pay more momentum points. So you pay 2 instead of 1 if you're wanting to move through difficult terrain. You still move the same distance, but you pay more momentum points. Okay, so here we are, just a representation of a small part of the battlefield. At the moment, the British have the momentum, and they are more than 4 base widths. Now, the frontage of my figures is 4 centimetres, so 4 base widths is 16 centimetres. So the French are well outside the 16 centimetre mark, the 4 base widths mark. So the British are going to do 2 things. First off, they've seen this cavalry looming here, so they're going to fire what's called, or going to issue a bombard order. And then they're going to issue a change of formation order. Now, neither of those, being within 4 base widths of the French, is going to allow the French to interrupt. Okay. Now, you'll have to forgive the camera here. I've worked out this is the best way to do this. So, first thing we do is we look. Now, you'll see there it says foot artillery. Not going to particularly matter. See if I can get that in any closer. It's actually a horse artillery unit I've got there. Fergus, you can do it. Okay, now see how it's got 3 little dice there with a 4+. That means it rolls 3 dice, needing a 4+ to hit. That's on bombard. Now, we're firing at French cavalry. Now, I know this says dragoons, not hussars, but see that number there out on the right-hand side there with the sort of explosion around it, 5+. Now, that's what you actually need to change one of the hits into what they call a disorder, which marks off one of those boxes. Okay, let's see how this pans out. So we said the British get 3 dice and they need 4+ to hit. This is a bombard. If there was something behind the cavalry, so if this unit here was behind, you would get what's called bounce through. you'd be rolling 3 dice again, same as the front one, but instead of 4 plus, it's always for bounce through, it's a 6. Okay. Now there's, the usual things that, say if that unit was in the infantry unit that I had behind there a minute ago was in woods, etc., etc. There's all sorts of situational stuff like that. But anyway, so they're rolling their 3 dice. They're looking for 4s. Okay, so we've got 2 hits. But to change that into a disorder, remember looking on the French card, we said 5 plus. So we take our two dice for 2 hits, and we're looking for 5 plus to cause a disorder, and we got 1. Now, what we do is we come over here to the French, the Dragoon. Well, the camera's not going to cooperate. Sorry about that. What we do is we mark, or how we do it, is we mark a slash underneath, like so. So at the moment, that cavalry unit's got a strength of 5. Okay. When you try and rally, which I might or may not go into with this game, what you're trying to do is get rid of any of these marks underneath. If you rally, all of the hits, or the disorders I should say, disappear, or, if you roll successfully. If you don't, they become what's called a permanent loss, and then the unit is permanently reduced in strength. We might run through that further on in this example. Okay, so the British artillery's fired, scored 1 hit on the French, a bombard order. They now pay another momentum, and they issue a change of formation order. And the British, of course, tend to fire better than anyone else, so it's advantageous for them to be in line. And we'll keep that unit, this unit here, we'll just keep them as is for the time being. Okay. So the British have spent 2 momentum, and let's imagine they've got 1 momentum left. So they decide to pass, handing the momentum to the French. The French spend a momentum. They want to get into attack. So they issue a movement order. Now, when you come up to the 4 base widths distance, in effect, you stop, and then if you've got enough movement allowance left, now you can't charge in for more than 4 base widths away. You've got to be within 4 base widths. But once you hit, if you're coming from outside 4 base widths, once you hit that mark, if you've still got movement left, you can go 1 base width if you're infantry, 2 base widths if you're cavalry. Let's see how that works. Okay. So this French unit is, let's say, 24 away. Now, French infantry moving in what's called mass, they go 6 4s, 24. Most sets of rules would allow them to do this. Not so this set of rules. They come up to 16 centimetres away, 4 base widths, and stop. Now they still had, well, they've barely moved, haven't they? They still had more movement left, but they can, once they've hit that 16 centimetre mark, they can only move 1 base width. So they go to there. Now it will be the same with this unit. And this unit, we don't have to be too precise. Now the cavalry is a little bit different. They can they can go 2 base widths if they've got enough movement left. Now normally, of course, most rules you could do that. Then the artillery would give defensive fire, try and run away, etc., etc. Not with this set of rules. Okay, so you come within the 16 range. They still had plenty of movement left, so they go another 2. So they should be, yeah, roughly, see they're roughly 4 centimetres, 1 base width ahead of the infantry. Now, because the French, they've got the momentum, but because they've now come within 4 base widths, momentum swings back to the British. So the British can interrupt, which of course they're going to do. Now, let's just pause it there while I organise my dice. Okay, so I've allocated the dice. Now, for volley fire, it's dice per base. You're basically firing per base. And the rules say, for as far as a mandatory target, the closest unobstructed target directly to its front. However, the shooter or shooting player may angle his fire up to 45 degrees to the left or right to shoot at some other target of his choosing. Now, what we've got here, I've made this a conscript unit. Now, conscript units fire 2 dice for each of their middle bases, but only 1 die for each of the side bases. I'll try bringing the camera around. It might be a bit of a better angle from over here. Okay. I'm not sure if this is going to work. There we go. All right. Anyway, let's try this. So conscripts and a lot of regular line fire 2 dice for the middle 2. This is when in line, and 1 dice for each of the side stands. Now, as you can see here, target directly in front would be this stand, and this stand. However, this stand, target directly in front, would be this French unit here. So we're going to have 5 dice shooting at this particular unit. We're going to have, oh look, 6 of one, half a dozen of another there. So probably 5 dice shooting at this unit. Definitely the 4 dice. 4 dice from this unit onto this unit here. Now the battery, remember before we rolled 3 dice. Now when you're within 4 base widths, that's volley range, basically think canister, and instead of 3 dice, and you measure from the centre of the unit, suddenly it becomes 3 dice per stand. So we're going to have 6 dice at the cavalry unit, 4 dice at this infantry, 5 dice at this infantry, and 5 dice at this infantry. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Frequent interruptions today. Who knows why? Let's start over here. Both of these battalions need 4+ to hit, and the French, for that to turn into a disorder, require 4+. So we'll start with this unit here. We're rolling 5 die, sorry. We needed 4+, now there's only 2. So if we roll those again, so I've got 2 hits. So we rolled trying to get a disorder, and once again we need 4 plus. No, nothing. So the conscripts went poof, not much happened. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dice. Again, 4 and 4. 4 to hit and 4 to disorder. So I've only got 2. So we need a 4 plus. We've got 1. So I'll leave that there for the minute. 4 at this one. Blimey. Who said the British could shoot? 2 2s, a 1 and a 1. Me touching the dice again, that's what's going on there. And down here, we've got 6 dice. Canister, we need a 4 plus. 1, 2, 3, 4. And to turn that into disorder, we need 5 plus. And 2. So we've got two more disorders on the cavalry. Now remember I said that the British had 1 momentum left, so they've used that momentum to fire. You would actually mark these units as having fired, okay? All right, we'll mark those losses on the French and then we'll come back. Okay, so we've recorded 2 more hits, or 2 more disorders I should say, sorry, on the French cavalry. They're now down to a strength of 3, and there's 1 hit on this infantry unit over here, so they're at a strength of 5. Now the British have no more momentum. Let's imagine the French are now down to their last momentum. They've already issued a move order to this force this turn, so you can't issue another move order to charge in, okay? You can only do, each unit can only receive a specific order, or that one particular order. There's 5, I think, off the top of my head. They can only receive it once per turn. So the French say, okay, I've got 1 momentum left. I know, I'll issue a rally order. Now a rally within 16 base widths would hand momentum back to the British, but the British A have no momentum left, and B, if the British were thinking of firing, they've already fired. So remember, I say you can't be issued an order twice, so the British wouldn't be able to fire. But in this case, the French have got 1 momentum left. They're going to try and rally the cavalry, and they're going to try and the cavalry have 3 disorders, and the infantry unit there have 1. Now, see if this will focus. Okay, so over here on the left there, that dragoon unit. See how I've got 3 crosses there? What you do, for each hit, you take a dice. So 3 hits, I want 4 plus to get rid of the hits. If I roll a 4, 5 or 6, the hit becomes permanent. Let's see how the French go. Okay, not too bad, considering it's a 50-50 roll. So we've got 2 6s and a 1. So what that means is, let's see if I can get this to work. Yeah, there we go. So 2 of those losses come off. So they're now at a strength of 5. But the one we failed, that hit, becomes permanent. So you can't rally this hit off. So now they're permanently down to a strength of 5. Okay, I'll try and roll off for this unit, this infantry unit. Remember, I need 4 plus. If you're within 4 base widths, it's 4 plus to rally a hit, a 50-50 chance. If you're outside of 4 base widths, you rally on a 3, 4, 5, 6. But if you don't rally, the hit becomes permanent. And they rally. So, well done, French. Well, after that shocking shooting by the British, things have got worse. The French have won the skirmish phase for the next turn, and they've issued a move order to this particular force. Now, they're within 4 base widths, so they're fully entitled to do a charge move, which is up to 4 base widths. So in go the French. Now, for charging, you can pivot up to 45 degrees and then go straight ahead. But in this case, it's fairly straightforward. This one here, I will pivot slightly, just so I can hit there. And this one here, I'll also pivot slightly. Now you pivot on the centre, like so. That was my fault for the example. I was trying to get 2 onto 1 anyway, but you get the idea. And least but by no means last, huzzah, the cavalry charge the guns. Now artillery, before we go to the, I guess what you'd call the combat resolution phase, the artillery get a chance to escape. Now, if it was a foot unit, it would only have 1 dice. Horse artillery get 2 dice. Likewise, because the French have cavalry, they get 2 dice. If it was an infantry unit, they would get 1 dice. What we're trying to see is, does the artillery limber up and move out of the way? And basically, whoever gets the highest dice on their roll, let's come back a bit. Whoever gets the highest dice on their roll. So let's do the British. So they've got a 5, not too bad. So that's their highest roll is a 5. For the French, they need a 6. If the artillery roll equals or exceeds the French roll, they get to escape. And then, and they do, a 5. The 5 matches. So what in effect happens is the artillery limber up and they actually leave the table, and they can come back the next turn, or they can try and come back in subsequent turns as a reinforcement. Now, here again is where Lasalle is a little different. Normally, well, when I say normally, in a lot of rules, the French would be able to continue on like so. The British perhaps might be able to try and form an emergency square, etc., etc. In Lasalle, no. The French stop there. Now, regardless of the outcome of these combats over here, because the French have done an action within 4 base widths, momentum will pass to the British, and I would say if the British have got an inkling, they will be forming square there. All right, let's have a look at the combats over on this side. Okay, so here we are over here about to resolve the close combat. Now, Lasalle again is a little different here. Let's see if I can swing this around just for a minute. Now, you've got your usual combat modifiers. Poor formation, that's basically if you're not in square and you get attacked by cavalry, or if you get flanked, you know, strong position behind a wall, blah, blah, blah. Usual combat sort of modifiers, +1 monitor, all that sort of stuff which gets added to your basic strength. Now, what's interesting about the combat results is that as an attacker, you've really got to win, but win big. You've got to ideally win by 3 or more. If you win by 3 or more, your opponent breaks. If you win, but you don't win by 3 or more, chances are you're going to suffer as many hits as the defender and bounce back. Okay? I forget what the word they call it. Where are we? It's got it here, stagger. Yeah, you fall back 1 base width, which in my case is 4 centimetres. So, when you're combating like this, you basically start with the basic strength of the units involved. Now, the basic strength for the British here is 6, and also for the French is 6. Oh, sorry, it's this one up here. Now remember, they did have a hit, so the British would have started with a 6-5 advantage, but remember the French rallied that off last turn. So all along the line, both sides start with a 6. The only modifier that's going to apply, is these 2 units here. Because they outnumber the British, they will get a +1 to their die roll. Here, it's a straight 6 versus 6. So let's do this one first. Usual thing, red, British, blue, French. Ooh. So the British defending have rolled a 6, the French have rolled a 3. So that's 12-9. Let's have a look at our combat results table. Now you apply the result to the defender first. Okay, so the defender, tied or greater. If the defender was a cavalry, they'd suffered disorder, otherwise no effect. Then you move on to the attacker. Now, we didn't outscore them by 3, so the enemy didn't break. We're still engaged, so we disorder and stagger. No longer engaged. Now that would have only applied if that other unit, if this unit, the defending unit here, had actually broken. Okay, so this unit suffers a hit and falls back 4 centimetres. Okay, now over here, the British roll 6 and 4 will be 10. Now this unit, 6 and 3, 9, 6 and 4, 10. So the best French result is 10-10. Again, we look at our chart, focus. Okay, the defender, the British, tied or greater. Cavalry, 1 disorder, otherwise no effect. For the French, still engaged, 1 disorder and a stagger. So both units would suffer a disorder, not a hit, so that you then have to roll to see if it becomes a disorder. It goes straight to disorder, and they fall back 1 base width, 4 centimetres. So what you can see from that is that before you go charging into anything, and I think this is quite historical, you need to wear it down either with fire or a cannon, volley, etc., so that instead of going at 6-6, you're going at something like, say, 6-4 or 6-3, ideally, to try and get the breakthrough. Now, here, the French, again, because they did something within that 4 base widths, this is a new turn, remember, because they did something within the 4 base widths, the momentum now swaps over to the British, and as you can imagine, I would imagine they're going to shoot, They may possibly form square because, there's a bit of a conundrum for the British player. Does he issue a change of formation, enabling these guys to form square? Now let's imagine that the British player, knowing that ideally he wanted to go first this turn, used his general to try and gain momentum points, and so he didn't use it for a tabletop intervention. Had he done so, he could have changed that to a square. If he'd put the general within 4 base widths, that could have changed to a square before any of this has happened. But let's imagine the British player had tried to get more momentum points, but still lost the skirmish, so the French got to go first. So the British player now has something of a conundrum. He could shoot here, which would be ideal, or he can issue a change formation to this unit here to form square, and I think that might be the best move to the British player to do, because if he shoots, the momentum, again, because it's happened within 4 base widths of the enemy, momentum will go back to the French, and you know where that French cavalry are going, and this formation here would suffer a -4 for poor formation versus cavalry. Somewhat nasty. So you can see just in that little microcosm there, some of the dilemmas and decision points that players have to make. Okay, let's wrap it up there, and we'll have a bit of a summary. Okay, let's try and wrap this incoherent drivel and poor camera work up. I think you're starting to work out why I think I should be a blogger and give up on YouTube. Anyway, okay, as indicated in the captions, yes, I forgot the +1 for the 2 French units here onto the British unit. Wouldn't have changed the outcome, but the British would have suffered a disorder themselves. Again, you look at the chart here, the British would have been outscored by 1 or 2. They would have suffered a disorder. They're not cavalry, so they don't stagger. The result for the French would have been the same. They're still engaged, so 1 disorder and a stagger. Okay. And yeah, I keep getting the words hit and disorder mixed up. The disorder is the actual casualty, if you like, on the unit. When you're shooting, you get hits and you're trying to turn them into disorders, etc., etc. All right, enough piffle. So look, that's Lasalle 2, a very confused and if somewhat brief overview. I hope I've given some idea of the game. For me, the excitement is that constant flip-flop effect that you get when you do orders to units that are within 4 base widths. So you're constantly anticipating, well, if I do this, but then the opponent will do this. But then if I don't do this, then the opponent will do that, etc., etc. So it really does create a sense of tension. So overall, I quite like the game. It's not a scale I particularly favour. Things that irk me, we saw here the rallies. Not a great fan of rallying off losses. I'm not convinced that it can't have too much of a sway on the game one way or the other. But that's just my own personal irk. Plenty of other rule sets do it, so, you know, it is what it is. Probably my really single biggest beef with the game, though, is that it does seem to get cluttered. As I say, each one of these units ideally should have a marker on them when they shoot, when they rally, for each of the 5 orders that I mentioned, because you have to keep track that you can't issue the same order to the same unit twice within the same turn. So you wind up, arguably, you could wind up with 5 markers next to each particular unit. Plus also this system of sort of marking when a hit turns into a disorder, you mark it, and then when you're trying to rally it, if you don't rally it, then it becomes permanent. Seems to create a lot of clutter in the game. This particular tag, it suggested that you cut that out and put it, you know, somehow attach it at the back of the unit. Yeah, not a fan. And if you make up a roster, which is a viable alternative solution, but then you've got to keep track of which unit is which is perhaps easier when you've got battalions and cavalry units all with different colours and markings. But say if they're French or Russian and they're all exactly the same, I realise that the Russian Yaga wore green pants and the Russian Lion wore white, etc., but you still got that problem of a multitude of units that all look exactly the same. So you've got to have some sort of marker or correlation, perhaps the flags. I don't know. That would be my one big beef against the game, that I don't like all this clutter. There are ways around it though. Okay, enough nonsense. So that's Lasalle 2. I hope that's given you some insight. If you'd like to ask a question, if I've missed something or confused something, by all means put in a comment down below and I'll attempt to answer your question as best I can. I don't pretend in any way, shape, size or form to be an expert. On our website, Sam Mustafa's website, there are forums there where you can ask relevant. Hope everyone is well. Hope to catch up with everyone again soon. Okay, bye for now.